So are you a musician or a band who wants to add lighting to the shows you already have lighting, and you're looking for a way to control these lights to give you the vibe that you want? I've been working on this issue for years and invested thousands of dollars into the equipment and lots of hours in programming too. And I want to share my experiences with you so you too can bring a more impactful light show to your performances. I'm going to share some of my perspective. I'm not a lighting designer, I'm not a pro, I'm just a musician who wants to add lights to their show. This won't be a comprehensive review of the products or their features, and it's certainly not the final word on these products. And this is not even necessarily going to be a linear watch. Instead, it's going to be more of a choose-your-own-adventure type of video.
From now on, you must choose your own path.
Where I use a certain methodology to examine possible solutions to these lighting issues. This is an opportunity for me to share some of my assessments with you and for you to begin to form some of your own. If you enjoy this video and find it useful, please help out the channel by liking and subscribing. You can also click on our affiliate links below. These are links to products that you might want, some of them that are discussed in the video, and if you purchase them, they're at no additional cost to you and a little bit goes to help out the channel. Now, concert lighting goes far beyond just illuminating performers. It provides mood, vibe, it can elevate the experience, it can highlight certain elements within the music and the tracks. It adds a lot of interest to a show, especially for like performers who may be solo performers or musicians who aren't as active. I mean, if you think about Pink Floyd, Tangerine Dream, they don't move around a lot on stage, even Kraftwerk, although they use a lot of video too. These musicians don't move around a lot on stage, but instead they have these really interesting light shows. And I guess that, for me, more than anything else, is what I was kind of going for. Over the years, lighting has become more portable with and less power draw with LEDs and that sort of thing. And it's become more affordable as there's more DJs out there buying this equipment. So it's within an affordable range for a lot of musicians and bands out there, and you may have accumulated some lights yourself. How do you control these lights and get them to give you the show that you think that they're capable of? Professional bands use professional lighting designers to control boards, but odds are that, if you're watching this video, you can't afford one of these things. Neither can I. And you may not even have somebody who could even run lights for you, so you may even have to rely on some kind of device like a board or a computer program to run your lights for you. And that's what we're going to discuss here. But even if you get one of these boards or one of these pieces of software, there's still the deep dive into DMX and all the issues of how to design lights. This video is not going to be about how to design lights themselves, but about products that can help you do that. Some of these products come in form of a software controller, and some of these come in the form of hardware, and we're going to look at two of each. Some of these controllers need to be programmed by the users, and some of these controllers will do their own programming, and we're going to look at two of each. In fact, we're going to look at 4 controllers in all. So before I talk about these 4 controllers, I'm going to again reiterate, I'm not a pro lighting designer, I'm just a musician. All of these products have proven effective by other reviewers, and many of them have their champions, and they can design incredible light shows using these products. So I may not always be the best representative of what is truly possible with these products, but again, I'm giving you my point of view here. Another thing I should add is that I do add some level of control either through, say, like plugins I design in Ableton Live, or by modifying some of the parameters in the controllers that design their own shows. So these aren't necessarily straight out of the box, and I'll discuss this as we look at the various controllers themselves. And now to introduce our 4 contenders. The first one is Lightkey. Lightkey is a software controller that includes a 2D visualizer and uses an annual subscription. SoundSwitch. SoundSwitch is auto-scripting software. It's included with DJ Engine decks, and you can either subscribe to it on a monthly or annual basis or buy it outright for that particular version. Number 3, the Wolfmix. The Wolfmix is a piece of hardware, and it's got a very familiar design. It looks a lot like an Ableton Push or something like that, or a grid controller like the, or even groove boxes like the Circuit Tracks. It's a standalone console. It can offer up to 4 universes, and it can offer a visualizer that it works with. It can even offer control over DMX, all of which are additional purchases or add-ons to the original purchase, which basically means, if you're not interested in using those features, you're not paying for those features when you buy the unit. And it's also a one-time hardware purchase. The last contender is probably the newest of all these, which is the Maestro DMX. This is a standalone hardware box with basically no external controls on it. And what it is it's audio in, DMX out, and inside of it, it's an AI lighting controller. And it will design light shows for you on the fly, just given the external audio stimulus coming in. It too is a one-time hardware purchase. So let me explain the approach of this video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all 4 controllers performing a light show to the same song. I'm going to present this several times over. I apologize if you find it tedious to hear the same song over and over again. It's one of my own creations. It's just kind of the backing tracks to something that has vocals that aren't really present in the track. And yeah, as an electronic music producer, I have a certain tolerance for repetitive structures, but this is more of a scientific control. In other words, they're all reacting to the same track, and we're going to see how each one fits the track. And that helps too, especially when we see what I'm going to show you first, which is all 4 of them side by side on the screen, like Brady Bunch style. So you can see how all of them are reacting in real time to the track and kind of get an idea of what each is doing. And once you have an idea of what each is doing, I'm going to have other options. So the 2 that are being more programmed and designed by me, like I took more input in the beginning, I'm going to show side by side so you can see how each one kind of revealed my vision to some extent. And the next video will be a side by side comparison of the 2 more automated tracks where either the software or the hardware is designing the show itself. And then I'm going to show each of them isolated so you can just appreciate them for what they're doing without being distracted by any of the other controllers or the other shows produced by the other controllers. And before I show you each of these videos, I'm going to describe what was involved in making that particular show in brief. So I'm going to talk about the lights that were used. I'm going to talk about how the DMX signal was transmitted to the lights, what that chain was. Of course, we're just going to make note of whether it was a hardware controller or a software controller. I'll talk about any other intermediaries that were used in it, say like Max MSP or QLC Plus, which is a software lighting board that's free, or any other thing that I use to kind of like control the controllers. You can control the controllers. I mean, the controllers send out the DMX, but you can control their behaviors. And finally, I'll talk about like what I was thinking about at the time, what my philosophy was, what my approach to the lighting was. And then you can watch that video to see how that played out. So please feel free to skip around. If you're not interested, say, in one of the products, go look at one of the other products. If you only want to see the 4-up, that's great. And then come back at the end of the video and I'll talk about some of the weaknesses and strengths, my assessments of what my experience was like and what I felt I appreciated most or didn't like about some of the controllers. And then I'll suggest some possible use cases for the various controllers because everybody has a different case. So go ahead and watch this first video with the 4-up and then choose your next adventure. So for the show that was designed using Lightkey, I had a gig bar move, 2 Chauvet 4-bar LTBTs. These are both lights that are set up really easy just on these trees, on these stands. And they're really quick to set up. And you get 4 fixtures on each 4-bar LTBT. And gosh, 4 fixtures on the bottom, 2 moving heads, 2 washes, a row of strobes, 2 derbies, and a laser on the gig bar move. And you're probably already familiar with the gig bar move. It's very popular. And the gig bar move, by the way, is going to be in all these videos, and so are the LTBTs. I was also using a Rockville 61 battery par, and that was underneath my table and under the scrim, and it was kind of illuminating the scrim. And that also will appear in all the videos. So given that Lightkey is software, I had to get the signal out from the computer and over to the lights. So to do this, I used a DMX King Micro USB to DMX interface. That would send a DMX signal out, and then into that I plugged in a Chinley DMX transmitter, and that went out to the various lights. Each of them had a receiver. So 1, 2, 3, 4 receivers. Now, as far as controlling Lightkey, I'd actually used it in a previous set in the previous year, and I was distracted by some of the lighting. So to control Lightkey, this time I decided to design a plugin using Max for Live inside Ableton. This plugin I ironically called an AI designer. Now, it's not true AI. It was just a little pithy name I could give it. But it was some kind of like a quasi-intelligent control of my lights. So Lightkey itself is kind of like its own lighting board with its own buttons to control various lights or functions or bring up colors and sequences, things like that. But what I wanted to do was, using certain controls, just control primary, secondary, tertiary kind of functions. I could control the overall density of how many lights were coming on. I could control the speed of how it was reacting. I could control these various things, and then I can automate that inside clips inside of Live. And then it would send information out to Lightkey, but it wasn't like directly controllable. I gave it certain randomized functions within a tolerance of parameters, so I wouldn't know exactly what to expect from the lighting system, just that it would perform within the tolerances I prescribed, which meant that I wouldn't be distracted by something I was expecting to happen that didn't happen, because I couldn't expect anything to happen. And from previous shows I had done, when lights had failed or some kind of transmission gone wrong, and then I'm like, oh no, something went wrong, and my mind is momentarily distracted from the music, I wouldn't have to suffer from that during this performance. In other words, it wouldn't be a factor. So the basic philosophy behind this setup was, first, minimization of design and setup with just the 3 light trees plus the battery operated par that I could just shove under my DJ table or whatever, my performance table, really, because I wasn't DJing. That was going to give me a lot of just ease of setup, especially in something I was going to have minimal time to set up. My AI lighting designer was basically a macro, and it took some of the details of having to program out direct sequences that went with the music. Yeah, it took some time to design the plugin, but it freed up my time in actually designing the show, and probably would have freed up future time had I stuck with it. And of course, the randomization just meant I wasn't going to be distracted. Also in this Lightkey video, I'm appearing in the scene. I was rehearsing, and so I was singing, but the track that I'm using here is the instrumental track, so you're not going to hear me sing, but that's just what's going on in the video. So for the Wolfmix, I use the same lights as a basis that I used with the Lightkey setup, which is the gig bar move, the 2 LTBTs, and the Rockville battery par. To these, I added 2, I think it's OPPSK light bars and 2 U-King spiders that I had attached to speaker poles, a light bar and a spider on either side. The Wolfmix is a hardware controller, and so what I did was I just basically plugged a Chinley transmitter into the back of the Wolfmix and then transmitted out to Chinley receivers inside the other lights. And with the spider towers, like the spider bar towers, I had like a Chinley transmitter in one of the bars, and then I just hard lined, a DMX cable out from that bar into the spider above it. Now, for the Wolfmix, I also designed a controller because the Wolfmix, this was the Mark I version of it, so you could control the recall of the presets, basically the lighting cues, and you can control the intensity or brightness of the 8 groups that you have on the Wolfmix. So 8 groups of lights, their brightness could be controlled. And I was able to kind of maximize my use of the Wolfmix. So I had like a 10 or 12 song set. And what I did was I allowed for 5 presets per song. And then using Ableton Live to control the presets, I could either bring up certain lights or bring them out. So even if I reused a preset, it would be a little fresh because the lights would do something different each time. And this meant I could also automate these functions within clips to brightness and intensity to capture rhythmic elements. But in order to control it, again, the Mark II has MIDI in to control it, but the Mark I only had DMX, what's called W-Link. And so you send a DMX signal into the Wolfmix to control these parameters. And of course, Ableton Live doesn't send DMX out. So what I had to do was send MIDI out from the plugin inside Ableton Live over to the QLC Plus program, which is a free program, and which gets honorable mention here because it is a free lighting controller you can use yourself, although I don't include it in here because it can be a little bit cryptic and tedious. Although, again, there are plenty of people out there who use it to great effect, and I've used it to various effect throughout the years. So anyway, I had this QLC Plus lighting console as an intermediary to receive the MIDI and then translate that into DMX. It went out the DMX King micro USB to DMX converter, and then through a DMX cable and various conversions there into the, I think it's the 5-pin in the back of the Wolfmix. So my philosophy at this time was kind of maximize things. I mean, I had lots of lights, comparatively speaking to some other sets that I've used, and I just wanted to put on a really bright and really interesting light show, and the Wolfmix kind of made that easy with all of its power and control in its hardware form. I was also very interested in kind of maximizing my design by using the visualizer to pre-visualize the shows and to really maximize it. Even when I wasn't in the studio, I could take it with a laptop and have the show there. I can look at it and listen to the music. And sometimes it helps me, again, to get out of the studio. If you know me, I've probably mentioned this before, that I like to go to a coffee shop or something like that and just be away and kind of be stimulated by an outside environment, so I don't like fall asleep or get distracted by things in the studio, because that sometimes happens to me. And the Wolfmix has certain limitations, and I was able to use that to great effect, like those 5 presets per song and the 8 groups I can control. I mean, it really is kind of minimalist control for MIDI, say, like compared to what you can get with, say, Lightkey. But that limitation helped focus the show a lot, I felt, and I was taking advantage of that. So my Maestro DMX setup. By this point, I decided to get rid of the U-King spiders and the OPPSK light bars. They were great, they looked good, but they took too much time to set up, too many things to attach, and too much of a hassle to transport. And I had changed my overall philosophy again to something more mobile, wireless, and battery operated. I had 4 Chauvet Freedom sticks and 4 Chauvet Freedom H1 wash lights. And these are all controlled via Chauvet's DeFi. But in this, I also included the gig bar move, the 4-bar LTBTs, and also the Rockville 61 battery power. So for the Maestro DMX, what I did was I plugged the Chauvet DeFi transmitter into the back of the Micro DMX, and that would transmit to the Freedom Sticks and to the H1 lights because they're on that DeFi spec. But the other lights aren't DeFi reactive. So I also have the Chauvet DeFi hub. That's a can either be a receiver or a transmitter. In this case, it's a receiver for the DeFi signal, and then it has a DMX out. And in that DMX out, I plugged in the Chinley transmitter, which then went to all the Chinley receivers to control the non-DeFi lights. So as far as controller automation goes, here there's none. Now, I just received the DMX Maestro, so it's pretty new. All I did was kind of like do some settings or updating one of their preset settings to make sure it was within the tolerances I like. So it's very similar to my approach on the Lightkey design with my AI lighting designer, just to give it certain parameters, make sure it was within tolerances, and then let it go. So that was really easy to set up and let go. That's pretty fun. Basically, the Maestro DMX doesn't need any controller automation. It can just design a light show straight from the audio input. So my philosophy at this time was basically to test the capabilities of the Maestro DMX. I wanted to throw as many lights at it as I could and then see what it would do with it. I wanted to have a lighting controller that was completely hands-free and even Max for Life plug-in control free, some of these other approaches I used before. One that I could just let go and let it take care of the lighting while I focused on the music. And as such, it had similar benefits to my AI lighting design, the fact that I didn't have to worry about what was going to happen next because I didn't know what was going to happen next. Of course, in this video here, we're just listening to the track. This is not me actually performing with it because, again, I'm just testing out. This is the newest thing that I've added to my setup here. Another part of this test is to see how it responds just to external stimulus, because this is the only device among all of them that has the potential to be a live responsive device, which means I could improvise something on stage without any prior setup for the lights. And that's a really cool prospect. Now for my SoundSwitch setup, I use the same one as I used with the Maestro DMX. It's basically the Chauve gig bar, the 2 LTBTs, the Rockville Par 61, and then the Chauve Freedom Sticks and the Freedom H1 wash lights. With SoundSwitch, you use SoundSwitch's USB to DMX converter. So that plugged into my laptop, and then it went out to the DeFi transmitter from Chauve, which went to the DeFi Lights, and then there's also the Chauve DeFi hub, which received the transmitter and forwarded that to the Chinley transmitter, which went out to the other non-DeFi lights and received the Chinley signal. And for SoundSwitch, again, no controller, external controller is needed. What SoundSwitch does is it pre-analyzes the audio track and designs its own light show to it. You can bring up their little auto-scripting function, and there are certain parameters you can affect. And so I did change a couple of parameters there just to kind of change the response of the lights, but I didn't do much work to it because, again, what I'm testing here is how easy and effective it is. So my driving philosophy here was to compare it to the Maestro DMX's real-time AI light show design. So my general assessment of the 4 different lighting approaches, when I'm looking at the 4-up and I'm considering the various lights side by side, my favorite is probably the one that was produced by the Wolfmix. To me, it was the most elegant, the one that most closely followed what I felt the song should feel like. So I like that one the best. Probably a second would be the Maestro DMX, because it was not as much work and yet did something fairly interesting. Next to that would probably be, at least in the way it was visually presented, the SoundSwitch DMX. It was a little bit hyper, a little kind of more DJ oriented. So was the Maestro DMX too, but I think the SoundSwitch even more than Maestro DMX. The Lightkey Show that I had captured on that particular video was probably my least favorite of the 4. But understand this, that Lightkey Show is randomly generated to some extent and would look different the next time I performed it. So it didn't always look like that. To me, it was a little dark. I was a little underrepresented. In terms of ease of use, the most fun to program was the Wolfmix. And so when programming is a joy, it doesn't seem that hard. And the most easy overall, the easiest overall, was probably the Maestro DMX. But then again, for me, the Wolfmix Show was more effective than the Maestro DMX Show. So let me share what I think some of the strengths and weaknesses of those various controllers are. For Lightkey, I think some of its strengths are you can create custom scenes and custom boards and custom controllers. There's a lot of customization that you can do with Lightkey. It also has that 2D visualizer, which helps you see the show without having to invest a lot into a more expensive visualizer. So that's pretty good there. It can also be controlled via clips in Ableton. So it generates its own Ableton clips that you can go into a subfolder and just pull out and put into a scene on your I forgot what was a session view. In your session view, you can just put it in on your scene, and it'll recall with that scene every time you go to it. So you can just have that lighting cue associated with that scene. That's pretty cool and pretty easy once you have it designed. Lightkey syncs with Ableton Link, and it offers you a lot of possibilities in terms of effects and chases and interesting animations with the lights. More so than probably all the others, except maybe SoundSwitch if you did a deep enough dive. Another one of its strengths is it can be controlled via MIDI or OSC. It's a pretty easy buy-in, or a low-cost buy-in, like at about $80 for 256 channels in a half universe. Lightkey's weaknesses. The 2D visualizer doesn't give you enough information about how your lights really perform in 3D space, and you have to use a lot of imagination to fill in the gaps, and it may not always be accurate. So it's marginally useful in that sense. With Lightkey, you can spend a lot of time setting things up. It's just almost like a slightly easier to use version than the free QLC Plus. One of its other weaknesses is that, yeah, you can buy in inexpensively, but you have to renew every year, and that can add up over time. Plus, at the cheapest level, you only get half a universe. So, and as you go up, it gets more expensive, and that year over year, it can be quite an expensive investment. So for Lightkey's triangulation in terms of affordability, ease of use, and effectiveness, I would say it's fairly affordable and it's pretty effective, but it can include a lot of tedious setups and things like that, unless you go really simple. So it's always 2 out of 3, right? So the 2 are, it's affordable and effective, but not necessarily easy to set up. Not as easy as some of the other solutions. For SoundSwitch, its strengths are basically that you can use it with a lot of different DJ software. I think it works with Rekordbox and Serato. I know it works with Serato. And I know it can work with Engine DJ. And because it works with Engine DJ, you can also run it on Engine DJ controllers. These are DJ controllers that are standalone units that have this software built into it that can, mix your tracks and all that kind of stuff without having to hook up to a laptop or anything external. And it also runs DJ lighting software, so you can take that SoundSwitch USB dongle or the USB, not dongle, but it's a converter, right, from USB to DMX, and plug that into the back of an Engine DJ controller and run your lighting show without needing any extra hardware or a laptop. So just the controller, the dongle, and a transmitter or a DMX cable to your lights. That's pretty cool. Another great feature of SoundSwitch is that you can batch auto script songs. So you can give it a whole list, a whole playlist of songs, and it'll just go whoosh, and just auto script all of them. And you have an instant light show that's somewhat relevant or salient to your tracks. Halloween wasn't that long ago, and I put in about 30 tracks or something like that and had them beat matched and scripted with a light show in less than 10 minutes. And it was a two-hour playlist. SoundSwitch also offers auto loops for music that isn't pre-analyzed. So you can just have it like kind of randomly go through auto loops or step through auto loops or just repeat an auto loop. So an auto loop is something that has the lights pulsate or do something else interesting. And you can bring up these auto loops either in the software itself. You can use their external controller to control this. They have another external hardware controller that'll control the software within LightSwitch, but it's not, I don't think it's standalone. And you can use LightSwitch auto loops on an engine DJ controller as well. SoundSwitch offers a monthly subscription or an annual subscription, or you can just, again, outright buy that version of the program. So you have a lifetime license on that version of the program. And they're all, relatively speaking, very affordable. So it's not free, but it's not very expensive. Weaknesses. The auto scripting overly relies on pulsations, just flashing lights, flashing here, flashing there. Notice a lot of the cues for the gig bar were just, at least in these particular editions, were over the top. Now, you can get really interesting things. I've seen guys do great things with SoundSwitch on YouTube, especially DJs that are really invested in the system. But that kind of programming is tedious. I mean, I did a set a few years ago where I did that. I was performing a bunch of original songs, and I was performing some songs that I was DJing. I scripted the DJ tunes and just let it do what it wanted because I didn't care so much about them because they're just tunes I was going to DJ. But for my songs, I wasn't particularly fond of what it was spitting out with its auto script, so I started going in and then customizing the auto script. And that, again, takes a lot of detail work and time. It's comparable to the kind of time that goes into scripting a light show with Lightkey. Just a lot of work. SoundSwitch also tends to be more like DJ dance floor oriented. It's more wild and erratic in its lights. It's just something to get people dancing. And if you're doing so slow tunes or rock tunes or other music, tends not to be quite so active. The lights, if you watch these professional shows, I mean, not professional shows, but like, the major tours and stuff like that, and with professional lighting designers, I do study that. And they tend not to be so flashy. Of course, they have more lights to play with. They have more variety kind of built into these massive systems. And you may just have like a gig bar move. And how do you make a light show interesting with that? But still, you can pull your punches and not be too active. And SoundSwitch tends to be overactive. And as I mentioned, the programming can be a bit tedious with SoundSwitch. So, and the interface to me is a little indecipherable. They got all these lines going everywhere. You'd think it'd be something like an envelope, and it is maybe a little bit like envelopes within clips within Ableton, but not entirely. And it just, man, if you got a multi-pixel light or something like that, it just goes on forever. And that's really tedious to script. Lightkey offers a better solution to that, where it can just do lights that, pixel lights that just kind of go up and down and do interesting patterns, things like that. So I kind of feel like SoundSwitch has two triangulations. The first is that it's, in terms of affordability, it's inexpensive. It's easy to use if you're auto scripting, but it's wild and inelegant. So therefore, to me, not as effective. The second scenario is that it's still inexpensive. It can be more elegant, but it's really tedious to program it to get it to behave like that and to figure out all of how it works. So at least for me, it just seems to be not my cup of tea. The Wolfmix strengths. Hardware. I mean, it's a familiar kind of an interface, right? It's like using an Ableton push or something like that. You're pressing buttons to pull up scenes. You're pushing other buttons to put in effects, not effects, but like special, like temporary effects like a strobe or a flash or a blackout, or even their little crazy Wolfmix button, which just makes the lights go haywire. And you also have various effects you can add to lights. So some of them can do color effects patterns, some of them can do intensity patterns, and some of them can do, if they're moving heads, they can do moving patterns. It's super easy to set up initially, and that's because it comes with all these profiles built in that you just pull up on its setup page and channelize on the light, and boom, there you go. It has limitations, and these can be looked at as strengths because, again, they, as I kind of mentioned earlier, in the Wolfmix video, they focus me. Like, these limitations say, like, I'm not looking at a big blank canvas or looking at all the possibilities there. I just have a few, and I can just think like, okay, with these few, what can I do? I have one moving effect per scene. So in one scene, the movers can move one way and do one thing. And then another scene, they can do something different. The same thing goes for the other effects. And it also goes for the fact that you only have 8 groups that you can vary intensity on. The interface on the Wolfmix is simple enough that even a novice could use it. So this is one of those cases where you could almost pull a friend aside, spend a few minutes explaining to them how it works, and then let them be your lighting designer if you trust them. Mark I is out of production. The Mark II is what's shipping. And the Mark II comes with 2 universes included with it, and you get the MIDI inputs. So rather than having to buy that DMX control that I did, you could just use MIDI via like a MIDI interface going straight into it. And that's really cool. I've used that, say, with like the circuit tracks. So I can dedicate a channel on the circuit tracks or some other kind of sequencer where you can send out MIDI values, and you can step sequence recalls of your cues, or even recalls of your lighting intensity on those 4 channels, or sorry, on the 8 groups. The Wolfmix can sync to Ableton Link via the WTool software on a laptop, but it won't do it independently, although it does receive MIDI clock, I believe. It also has an audio input for putting an audio signal in there for it to detect the beat off the kick or something like that. It can also sync off of its own built-in microphones. It's kind of cool that they give you that option. You know, the most accurate will be the MIDI or the DMX signals, and then the next one would be probably the audio direct input, and then the last one would be the mic. I think it's in their instruction manual. They even talk about that. The Wolfmix can be powered by a USB battery bank, which means you don't necessarily have to plug it into a wall or to a computer. It's a standalone controller, so you don't need a laptop or a computer to control it. The Wolfmix also allows for chained or randomized playbacks of its various cues or presets. And that can be interesting if you're doing a set and you don't particularly care how the lights are going. You just want to do something interesting, and you can just select a row or a column and then have it just repeat that row throughout your tune. In that sense, it's a bit like the auto loop function on SoundSwitch. So weaknesses for the Wolfmix: you only have 8 groups. You can't expand from there. Again, with QLC Plus or with Lightkey, you can add more groups. But with the Wolfmix, you just get the 8. There's 3 types of effects, and you can only have one type of each of those 3 types of effects: move, the intensity effect, or which is basically like a pixel effect essentially, or the color effect, the various colors that it does. You can only have one type of color effect per scene, one type of moving effect per scene, one type of intensity effect per scene. You can just assign them to various groups or not. There are special overwrite scenes you have called live edits that can like bring in like special effects lights, like say your derbies or your lasers or something like that. They can also be used to like override, say, like my front par settings. So instead of having them flash with something, some of them just become, subject lights. They just kind of illuminate me on stage, and they stay fixed with like a warm white or something like that. But you cannot automate these things via MIDI. And it's something that many of the users are hoping that the makers of Wolfmix will update eventually. We'll see. And not only live effects, but also the other effects and the flash effects. Those are the ones like strobe and all that kind of stuff. None of these are automatable via MIDI or DMX. And here's another thing that's kind of interesting. A complex setup with lots of lights with their various modes and their channelization on the screen of the Wolfmix can be very difficult to set up, because with Lightkey and SoundSwitch, they give you a graphical interface for how these things lay out across the available channels you have in a particular DMX universe. And also, I think it's something similar with the Maestro DMX. There's a space where you can say, you know, what your channelization is. With the Wolfmix, it's all just like by a column, like the name of the light and the number, and you got these various controls to do it. So it really takes, if you have lots of lights and lots of channels to consider, it's going to take a spreadsheet to really keep track of where you're adding things, because the Wolfmix won't allow you to add a light with a starting DMX address where any of that light's channels that proceed from that address are going to overlap with some other lights assigned DMX. So let's say you have a light with 10 channels on DMX address 11, and then you have a light with 5 channels on DMX starting with DMX channel 15, well, that 10 is going to overlap the 5 that starts on 15, and therefore the Wolfmix will say, no, you can't put it here, choose another slot. And if you're not keeping track of your slots, you don't know where you can put it because where are the gaps. So yeah, that can be a little bit tedious too. But if you only have a few lights, then it's a dream to set up. So I think the triangulation on the Wolfmix is interesting. It doesn't get high marks in terms of affordability compared to the other products except for the Maestro DMX. And it does get high marks in ease of use, and it also gets higher marks for me in terms of its effectiveness. I think I designed one of my best light shows using the Maestro DMX because it was so immediate, punching hardware and seeing what it looked like immediately, just boom, 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 boom. And it's really easy, just pulling up buttons and going to various places. So it's almost like playing like a circuit tracks or just making performance on a groove box. But here's another thing to consider about the Wolfmix. It has a lot of functions as a hardware controller that bigger lighting boards have at a fraction of their price. Yeah, it's not quite all the functions they have, but it's way more than you get with like a Chauvet Obey, or I used to have a Behringer LC 2402 or whatever it was. There was a 24 channel DMX channel board. Everything 24 DMX channels compared to like the 512 in a lighting universe. That didn't last long because it couldn't even move a mover. So yeah, when you compare the Wolfmix to other cheaper lighting boards that are closer to its price range, it offers a lot of features and a lot of ease of use. Now we come to the Maestro DMX. I'm going to try and assess its strengths and its weaknesses as I perceive them now, but it is the latest addition to my little collection of controllers I have here. So I've only had it for less than a week, and so, you know, a more proper evaluation is yet to come. But just for what I've experienced now, these are what I perceive to be its strengths and weaknesses. So strengths. It creates a light show simply by using audio stimulus. I mean, that is a major strength. It is the only device among all these that really does that in any kind of intelligent way. It's not just like a sound active kind of a mode or just like a beat driven kind of a mode. I've tried that with various consoles and it just never works out quite well. But with this one, it's more intelligent. It gives you more salient or effective results in its analysis of the music. And because it's listening to the music, there's really no need for beat detection, and it tends to be pretty much on. I found that it even detects, I don't know if it is detecting or not, because, you know, they say it's AI. I don't know exactly how the AI works on the thing, but I'll just take their word for it now that it truly is artificial intelligence. And it seems to pick up on subtle, like, inner rhythmic movements within the music. I don't know if that's apparent in the video that I shared of my track, but it certainly wasn't some copywritten tracks that I can't share on YouTube that I observed, that it would actually listen like boom, You see that represented in some of the lights that were flashing. I thought that was a really interesting kind of thing that it did. If you've got it set up and programmed right, whether you can use an external controller, and it does use OSC, that's another strength. You can use Open Sound Control to address particular parameters within the unit and change them on the fly, including calling up new sets or new scenes where you've got all your parameters for the colors and the primary, or for all the colors and for all the moving effects and things like that. You can do that via OSC, but it's pretty much set it up and forget it. Just, you know, put it down, plug in the audio cable, plug in the DMX out, and then do your show. That's pretty cool. I mean, that, again, is amazing. And the fact that it doesn't have any buttons or controllers and it just kind of dissuades you from even trying to. I mean, again, you can hook up something external, but you don't necessarily have to. So in that sense, it's simple but powerful. So weaknesses for the Maestro DMX. It's kind of like SoundSwitch. So it shares this weakness of its at least the programming out of the box, is more DJ dance floor oriented, pumping and doing this kind of stuff, and not some of the more mellow and subtle things that you'll see in most concerts. Again, out of the box, it overuses the effects on the gig bar move. Now, if you go to DMX's YouTube channel, you can see how, I think it's the chief technical officer or something like that, he shows you how he can kind of disable that or use them as effects. But then again, at that point, then you have to have their little web interface that goes to the DMX Maestro. You have to have their website up on the unit, and then you can hit the button to enable effect, or you can use OSC or something like that. But now you have to press, or it takes programming or something like that, and we're back to, for me, I might be back to designing some kind of a macro or master controller inside Ableton, that would call them up. But then that, again, if I'm using that off of Ableton, since I don't have a push 3, that would necessitate a laptop. Now, I haven't experienced this directly, but just to share, one of its weaknesses that I've read about is that it's Wi-Fi. It comes with a dongle that goes into the back of it that's a Wi-Fi transmitter receiver, Wi-Fi transceiver, to interface with it. So you can use a laptop or a cell phone or tablet or something like that and log on to its network and control various parameters of the Maestro DMX from that laptop or controller. But I have had this experience in the past where, say, I was using a Behringer XR12. I was doing a gig with a band, and there were a ton of people there with cell phones, and we could not access the mixer because the XR12s you access via Wi-Fi or Ethernet or something like that. And I could not access the mixer in that environment to disable the mutes and things like that. And I was informed by my drummer, oh yeah, you need to get a 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi base rather than the 2.4 that was kind of standard, and plug that in order to overcome the noise in the room. So I'm assuming that it's probably something like that with the Maestro DMX. So the triangulation between affordability, ease of use, and effectiveness on the Maestro DMX is that it's not as affordable as some of the other things. It's around about the same par as the Wolfmix, so not as affordable as SoundSwitch or Lightkey. It can be totally easy to set up, and even some of the parameters inside were not that difficult to deal with. You just program, put in your lighting profiles. Those you do have to download from a site that Maestro DMX has dedicated to storing their profiles for various lighting systems, and they tell you don't use any of the ones that are built in. Go to the site. It has more salient responses than SoundSwitch, which is the other kind of auto-scripting device. But in my experience, or my opinion so far, less salient than if I'm programming it myself. But that's, of course, because I'm programming it myself. So if I was thinking about what I feel might be effective in front of an audience, I think that maybe perhaps my own programming would be more effective in front of an audience. Then, honestly, though, sometimes I find out the audience doesn't care. So it's this toss up between how much do you want to control it. Well, the whole point of the Maestro DMX is that it makes decisions and it brings things up, and as long as, again, you can constrain the parameters and it's within tolerances that you appreciate and and you feel reinforce your music and bring some of that magic to your show, then it is great. Because again, it just takes in the audio and does it on the fly. And one of the features I'm looking forward to testing out with it is that live improvisation. I'm really looking forward to that. So what do I think the use cases are for each of these controllers? What are the best scenarios to use them in? So let's talk about Lightkey. I think Lightkey shines when you're using Ableton Live to do your sets, and you can just put a clip for one of its scenes just in your scene, and it instantly recalls with that scene, which means it can be somewhat improvisational responsive as you're going back and forth between scenes if you don't just do them kind of linearly down. And that makes it rather powerful and simple compared to some of the other options. I think it also shines when you're wanting some lighting software that has a visualizer. Yeah, it's 2D, so it's not as great as a 3D, but it's still a visualizer and something. And when I was using it, that's one of the things I really appreciated about it, is that I got some kind of an idea of the setup and impact of the lights, even though I kind of had to use my imagination to expand it out to what it would actually look like in the room. So SoundSwitch, its uses, it shines when you're a DJ and you just need to quickly auto-script your playlist. It also shines when you're putting that playlist into an engine DJ controller, because then you just take the DJ controller, the SoundSwitch dongle, and just do a light show like that. I mean, you basically have one piece of hardware that's going to control your music in your light show, and that's awesome. You can even use, the DJ controller as backing tracks, play an instrument live, put it in a mixer, that kind of a thing. So that's the use of DJ controllers. I don't know that a lot of people have talked about, and I'll probably do a video on that at some point. I also think that SoundSwitch is really great for people who are just seeking that point of entry into DMX software control. And it's currently less than $10 monthly to subscribe to SoundSwitch and use it as a controller. And if you're not using it for a while, you can stop the subscription and subscribe back. That's what I've done in the past. And it's great. I mean, so it's really easy to use there, as long as you don't care so much about like the details. So affordability it's so affordable that you can forgive it a lot of its DJ orientation. And if you just want that ease of use, just use the AutoScript. But if you want something that's more, more designed, more specific, then put the time into learning it and watch some of the videos that are available on YouTube that will explain how to do this. So good use cases for the Wolfmix. One of them is when you're using Ableton Live. You can use MIDI now to control the scene recall. You can also use MIDI to control the intensity of the groups. And automating that from Ableton Live, the Wolfmix gives you a very powerful kind of hardware control of everything, and Ableton Live gives you just a little more extension over that control to animate a few things more. So that's a great setup. Just using it standalone with a band and just kind of maybe calling up a scene yourself on stage. If you just need to recall one scene and just have one set of like effects going on, and you have a very simple setup, that can be really great. I mean, because you could design it to be very beautiful and interesting. Another one is where you want to chain something and just let it do a series of scenes in order, and then you just jam out, or you do your performance on whatever song it is, and then call up another scene. Then you can do that quickly on the controller. It doesn't take long to set up or get going. Another use case is in a DAW setup, because you can actually automate parts of it from your DAW setup using MIDI. So if your DAW setup includes a MIDI sequencer, you can send MIDI notes out to it, or use various controls to call up various presets and automate that with your playback of your DAWless performance. Another one would be when you're wanting beautiful results from what you're working with minimal effort, but also with restrictions. You have to accept the certain restrictions from the Wolfmix. But I think that's an easy trade-off given how immediate it is when you're using it. So again, if you're the kind of musician that really likes playing an instrument, the feel of having an instrument respond to you, then maybe you'll really enjoy how the Wolfmix responds to you when you use it and almost play it like an instrument. And the best use case for the Maestro DMX, well, when you want just minimal effort on stage or even prepping, you just put music through it and you go. And if you want a little more control, well, you can go in and use the interface to control that. And if you want a little more control, you can use OSC or whatever to control that. But it just gives you right out of the box, with minimal effort, a lot of possibilities, because the light shows are going to be responsive to the dynamics and the music and the rhythm and things like that. And that also makes it the only one that is going to actively respond to an improvisation. Like jazz musicians, when they improvise, they're listening to one another and they're feeding off of each other. And it's almost like this lighting can do that. At least from what I've seen it do with a recorded session, I'm like, well, if that was me playing live, it would probably do something like that too. Especially if I maybe did something that was like somewhat predictive, and it was like, okay, I kind of get what you're going with this. Again, like jazz musicians would do. So that's one of the things I think that it should be good at using, although honestly, I haven't tested it yet, because again, I just got the unit, so I'm looking forward to testing this. Well, thank you for getting this far in the video, and you've heard some of my opinions. Now, I would love to hear what some of your opinions are. I mean, what did you think of the performances of the light shows? Do you have these units? What are your experiences with them? Have you heard of something else that you think would be a good contender in this space? Go ahead and let me know down in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.